I'll call the meeting to order then. And first item of business is item 1.1. Are there any items on today's agenda that give rise to conflict of interest or pecuniary interest? Councillor Pauls?
Yeah, 13.2. I won't have anything to do with it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. The minutes will note that Councillor Pauls has conflict on the one closed session item. And then we have today's agenda before us. Are there any adoptions or changes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Councillor Simpson moves that. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and Jason, are you linked in? I just wondered if Jason's screen is frozen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Were you in favor of the agenda, Jason? Okay. All right. So that's unanimous then. Then we have item 3.1, regular council meeting minutes of May 25th, 2021. Are there any errors or omissions? Does anybody care to make a motion to adopt the minutes then? Councillor Chapman? Okay. Councillor Chapman moves the minutes as circulated. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. And we have a public hearing scheduled for 5:05 p.m. and it's just turning on to 5:05 on my computer here. So we have the public hearing for advertising bylaw 814R0521. We can entertain second and third reading on that. I'll open the public hearing. My name is Kim Craig, Mayor, and I'll be chairing this public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through me. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is subject of this hearing. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Anybody wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter. As called upon by myself as chair, each presenter must state his or her full name, address, and their interest in this matter, including whatever they are in support or not support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given the opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a suggested 3-minute time limit on the presentation and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous speakers if possible. If new presentation materials are provided, you may be required to email a copy to the legislative coordinator. And so do we have anybody that has registered to speak either for or against, Lana?
No, Mayor, I did not receive any notification of anyone interested to speak to the matter.
Okay, so I'll turn the floor over to Leah then to introduce this. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you, Mayor Craig. So as you mentioned, the purpose of this public hearing is to present the public notification and advertising bylaw. So this bylaw falls under section 606.1 of the MGA, which allows municipalities to approve alternative methods of advertising. So this bylaw outlines 5 different strategies for advertising. The electronic publication via Let's Connect, the newspaper circulation, direct mail outs, social media, and the Coaldale website. So we do currently already advertise through several methods listed in the MGA, including the newspaper circulation, the Coaldale website, and direct mail outs. This bylaw simply formalizes our advertising options and gives residents more opportunities to stay engaged, ask questions, and to give feedback. So I will say there was one piece of resident feedback that we captured through the Let's Connect platform that didn't quite make it onto the agenda, and I apologize for that, but I will read it out loud here. So it says, I like the Let's Connect website, but notices should always be announced in a newspaper and with mail outs. Facebook posts with links to Let's Connect are helpful. I'm online a lot, but our town has a lot of older citizens who might prefer paper info. Most announcements recently have used all methods, but the bylaw says one or more. I say the more the better. And so that's the end of that comment. And that also concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Is there any questions through the administration on the proposed bylaw? Councillor Chapman?
Thank your worship, and through to Leah, thank you so much for putting this together. Just my only question to you is, would you need to establish what you will exclude from advertising, so to include state that you will not use Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, any of those other media feeds for advertising?
I believe at this time, thank you for your question, Councillor Chapman. I believe at this time on our Let's Connect page, we do have a sidebar that lists the ways that we have advertised each bylaw. And in doing so, we are listing, I guess, every single way that we have and also haven't advertised. So there is a list. We don't necessarily make that announcement, but it is publicly shared on that website.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I see nobody else. And there's nobody else lined up to speak either for or against, other than the read-in comment from Let's Connect then. So would council, does anybody have any desire to ask any more clarifying questions? Councillor Lloyd? You're back on the mute. There you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question. If the bylaw says one or more, who determines which ones that it will get put onto?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Lloyd. So we put one or more just to kind of give us the flexibility in the rare case that there's any last minute public submissions. So for instance, in the MGA, I believe it says that we need 2 weeks of newspaper circulation. And if we don't quite, just with the timing of everything with newspaper circulations, you have to submit things by a certain date. And if we don't miss that, or if we miss that deadline, then that would push back a public notice to a further council meeting. So just to speed things up and give us a little bit more flexibility if that does happen, we just have other methods that we can formally advertise through and not deal with any consequences of not having that double circulation in that rare case. But we are committed to using all of our channels. I think, as our resident feedback mentioned, the more the better, and I think we also agree with that.
Spencer, did you want to weigh in as well, or?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and good evening to you and Council. I just wanted to bookend Leah's last comment with the fact that with the flexibility component, and if there's a miss on the newspaper for a particular item that needs to be advertised, that certainly wouldn't be exercised for major items. And really, we're just looking at more of a minor clerical items to provide that flexibility to ensure that we can continue good governance moving forward, rather than trying to exercise that with larger items that would much more so benefit from a comprehensive advertising campaign.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Okay, last call for questions. Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'll close this public hearing and we'll deal with the with that under 7.2. And then we have okay, we're good to go for that now. And then we have item 4.1, we have Highway 3 and 845 intersectional improvements, and we have Dustin Yankee here to present. Welcome, Dustin.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So I'll be discussing the transportation study that was recently completed by Watt Consulting Group. It analyzed the intersection of Highway 3 and Highway 845 and how that relates to the intersection immediately south at 20th Avenue and Highway 845. These issues were formally highlighted in the Transportation Master Plan, which was also completed by Watt Consulting, where they recognized that the short stacking distance between the two intersections was causing issues at the 20th Avenue intersection, which results in lengthy delays and unsafe turning movements across the intersection by motorists. This was last discussed at the November 23rd council meeting, where Watt had presented their initial recommendations. Following some feedback from councillors, they added a couple more options to their study, and we're here to present that tonight. And I also have Bruce here for some technical expertise if required. So jumping right into it, in the staff report here, we have options 1 and 2. These are the more costly options. They require more physical upgrades to the intersection. We are lucky here that we own the lot where the 7-Eleven used to be and where Westland Insurance is currently. So this is why this became a possible option, but we'd be looking at adding either a right-hand turning lane or a left-hand turning lane. And this would just allow vehicles to travel through the intersection easier and reduce the probability of vehicles stacking back up to 20th Avenue. Jumping into options 3 and 4, a little bit different because we're looking at 20th Avenue. And this, instead of focusing on the stacking distance issue, we looked at it from the perspective of just removing the turning movements that are considered unsafe. So by forcing people to only go right in or right out off of 20th Avenue, the stacking distance issues, they could still occur. They're just not causing safety problems at the intersection. So option 3 was discussed in the last council meeting. And then upon recommendation from Councillor Simpson, we also added option 4, which allows traffic to still flow freely onto Main Street. So this still provides some benefit in terms of the unsafe movements heading westbound off of 20th Avenue on the eastbound leg, but takes into consideration the stakeholders on Main Street and the businesses, and just keeping in mind that restricting traffic to Main Street could be a concern. So I think either way, there would be some engagement required with the public and with the businesses, but these are just 2 of the extra options that Watt had analyzed in the report that do provide functional and safety benefits to the intersection. The last option that they reviewed was simply looking at the traffic signals at Highway 3. By adjusting the timing of the signals and the phasing, they actually were able to model it in their software and come up with a more optimized timing plan. So based on the current timing that Alberta Transportation is using, we can shorten the cycle length and create a lower level or a higher level of service for both intersections. So traffic would be able to flow through Highway 3 and Highway 845 intersection more fluidly, which would reduce the stacking distance and in turn benefit the 20th Avenue intersection. Currently, these traffic lights are maintained by the city of Lethbridge, and we would have to begin discussions with Alberta Transportation to get their approval. But providing a functional and safety benefit to both intersection seems like a pretty big win-win from our perspective, and it should be from their perspective. So we don't expect a lot of pushback, but there would be some coordination with Alberta Transportation. So based on all of the options and talking to the consultant, at this time, our recommendation would be to start with option 5. It's a low risk, low cost option. We can monitor it into the future, and once we know the benefits and the cons of it, we could potentially implement any of the other options in the future as well. We're not limited by choosing option 5 going forward. We can still keep the other options in our back pocket. And Bruce, you're on the call here. Was there anything that I missed just going over the options that you wanted to touch on quickly that's pressing in your mind?
No, I think you've covered most of it, Dustin. Just in general, like the way that we see it, as Dustin pointed out, is an opportunity to do incremental improvements to this intersection to gain some benefits. We know that physically the spacing of 20th Avenue from the highway makes it difficult and leads to some unsafe traffic movement. So I think the options, as Dustin has outlined here, are all possibilities for improving the capacity and improving the safety at this intersection.
Well, thank you, Justin and Bruce. Does council have any questions? Councillor Chapman and Councillor Holm.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Dustin and Bruce, for your presentation this afternoon. I'd like to speak in favor of options 2, 3, and 5. With option number 2, the two left-hand turn lanes going west onto Highway 3 really is a good idea. Plus, having the middle lane maybe turning left as well as going straight through. And that being the reason for that is that there is quite a bit of stacking off of 20th Avenue, turning onto 20th Street and then turning onto Highway 3. And so this will help improve the stacking problems exiting off of 20th Avenue, Main Street by Westland Insurance. Number 3, I didn't see too much difference between it and number 4. I still thought that number 3 can be useful, mainly because, as I was speaking with a former CPO for the town of Coaldale, the suggestion was that east and west traffic can be or should be restricted for certain periods of the day. Not that you would want to restrict it, 100%, but you could probably restrict them for certain hours of the day, much like many areas in the cities like Calgary, Lethbridge, and other municipalities have for restricted straight through or even left-hand turns throughout the day. And number 5, I see that as inevitable, mainly because we already are at a growth stage, and being that 845 and Highway 3 are already the busiest intersection, obviously, in Coaldale, that light synchronization will be really critical moving forward. Those are my comments.
And Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too agree that option 5 to me seems like a logical choice, but do we not have to have a lot of conversations also with CP Rail on that? It's one thing to put sensors into the road to change the highway, but if we got a train going through, all of a sudden we could stack up a long ways, both southbound and northbound, and leave the green light for a long time because of CP rail there. And I thought they had some issues with that at Broxburn when they did the lights there, but that's just some questions that our engineers and our specialists will be able to answer on that really quick. The second one is I don't like option 2, only because right now, unless there's going to be actually a turning lane signal installed there as well. Right now, if there's a semi going facing southbound turning east, visually you can't see past it to actually make a left-hand turn on the northbound lane anyway. So now if we were to put 2 lanes of traffic trying to turn west, I think we're looking at some real issues there with accidents happening because you can't see around vehicles that are in the southbound lane. So unless we're going to actually put turning lanes in, turning signals in there, which could impact an awful lot, especially with the proximity to the rail line, I'm just worried that we might have some issues there. So that's just my comments.
Dustin and Bruce, do you want to respond to either Councillor Chapman or Councillor Holm at this time?
Maybe I'll address Councillor Holmes first. Thank you, Councillor Holm. Your question about option 5 in terms of CP. So those would be actuated by a controller when the trains are coming. So adjusting the signal phase wouldn't have an impact on that. It's just the phases in between. So every time a train comes, that's going to get triggered regardless. But AT still has to accommodate CP in all instances. So if Alberta Transportation gives us approval, then ultimately CP would already have been looking after. And in terms of option 2, those 2 turning lanes would be protected only turning phase. So there would be the southbound traffic would have a red light, similar to what you see on 43rd and Highway 3 in Lethbridge. You can only turn on the green arrow signal, and then you'd be red in between. So that's pretty standard, I guess, when there's 2 left-hand turning lanes, that they would require a protected only green phase, it's called. Did you want to add anything, Bruce? Sorry, nodding your head there, but.
No, I agree. You've answered correctly, Dustin. That's kind of what we were thinking. And actually, maybe just to add on something with changing the signal timing to a protected only phase, it doesn't give us as much of a benefit because then those northbound left turns going west to Lethbridge can only go during that one phase. So when comparing it to the other ones, we actually saw that one kind of drop off in terms of the benefits.
Okay, we have Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm in favor of the signal timing optimization. I think it's the best way to try it and see if it works. But I would like to make sure that this comes before council prior to any work ever happening on the old 7-Eleven location and the new Westland location. So I just think is important that, if there's any issues and this isn't working, that's brought forward before anything is done so that we can accommodate if we do need to go into another phase of it.
Any other members of council? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. Again, just in addition to my comments, I wanted to ensure that we are looking forward to a specific right-hand turn lane onto Highway 3. That seems to be really where a lot of the most pressure, especially with some of the big trucks that are being held up on the highway on 845. So I would recommend that we invest into a right-hand turning lane onto Highway 3.
I would suspect that we'd have to maybe directed that be included in budget deliberations, because we haven't really allocated any funds for that type of project right now, but that could certainly be a recommendation going forward. Councillor Simpson?
Your worship. So I'll make a motion to approve the signal timing optimization with a updated report coming to council before any improvements, other improvements are done on the adjacent land that we own.
Okay, we have Councillor Simpson's motion. Do you have that motion okay, Elena?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
All right. Any discussion on the motion? Bruce, you want to, okay.
No, I'm good.
Okay. I see no discussion. So we have Councillor Simpson's motion before us. I'll call the question. All in favor? So that's unanimous. And if I call the vote unanimous and that wasn't quite right, please speak up, councillors. But I see that was unanimous in my vision, so that was carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Bruce and Dustin, and enjoy your fire practice. Be safe out there. Okay, and we're at 5:28 right now, so I don't think we have any time for any other any other business. So I'll introduce the next public hearing, and it's on land use rezoning bylaw 817-P-21. It's a public hearing that could entertain second and third reading of that land rezoning bylaw. My name is Kim Craig. I will chair the public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through me. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is subject of this hearing. Excuse me. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Everyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter as called upon by myself as chair. Each presenter must state their full name, address, and their interest in this matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given the opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within, as is suggested, 3 to 5 minute time limit on the presentation, and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous speakers if possible. If new presentation materials are provided, you may be required to email a copy to our legislative coordinator. And Lana, do we have anybody in the waiting room that will be addressing this matter?
Mayor, Mr. Peter Box is here to speak to the matter. He's
Okay.
present at the meeting right now.
Okay, very good. So I will first turn the public hearing over to Spencer Croyle to introduce the rezoning bylaw. Go ahead, Spencer.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And again, good evening to you and council. I'm just going to share my screen briefly. I have a brief presentation ready for this item. So just a quick technical check. Can everybody see the PowerPoint slide?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for that confirmation. So as you've already mentioned, this is in support of the background information that council would need to make an informed decision on bylaw 817-P-05-21. This is a rezoning regarding the next phase of development in the Parkside Acres area structure plan neighborhood. In terms of the subject property, this involves the northeast portion of the Parkside Acres community, the last portion of the community that isn't developed or planned to be developed, subdivided and developed. So more specifically, it only involves a portion of what can legally be described as a portion of Southwest 13,920 west of the 4th meridian. And the particular area we're discussing this evening is about 1.84 hectares in size, or just over 4.5 acres in size. And we can see where that is on the image on the screen right now. In terms of a brief background for the property, the current zoning of the 4.5 acres that we're discussing this evening is urban reserve, and surrounding properties are also zoned either urban reserve, a variety of residential single detached dwelling land use districts, so R1B and R1C. R2L is another form of multi-unit housing district that's on Sunset Place on the far west side of the Parkside Acres neighborhood. And then there's also other uses in and amongst this area. So we have some C2 properties, the light pink hue on the north end. And then of course, south of Parkside Acres is institutional recreationally zoned property for the campground that's being redeveloped right now. In terms of what this looks like as compared to the current area structure plan concept that is approved and on the books as a part of the original bylaw that brought the Parkside Acres neighborhood to life. The current concept plan shows the area as primarily multifamily residential with a very small corner in the southwestern corner of the 4.5 acres we're discussing as low density residential. Now, how that compares to the proposed rezoning is slightly different, but still meets the intent and purpose of the neighborhood plan. And we'll go over this just very briefly to clarify what I mean by that. There is a component of what is shown on the site plan here as townhomes, or what we would consider R2, so residential multi-unit zoning. And then there's also area for 13 R1C, or residential starter lot units to be developed on the east side of an extension of Parkside Way. So just going back again to this last image, there's actually more area for multifamily shown on the concept plan than there is on the plan that's been brought forward this evening. Again, the commentary from a planning perspective would be that it still meets the purpose and intent of the concept plan, given the zonings that are suggested for the two pieces of land that are shown on the screen here, again being the R2 proposal in the yellow orangish hue, and then in the purple area that would be R1C. Zooming in again just briefly, I should make a note that there was commentary at the first reading of this bylaw, in particular around the idea of consideration for what the street design would look like. Now, what we see on the rezoning file is a street width of 16 meters. And I can report that as a part of the subdivision process to eventually bring these lots on board, should the rezoning be approved, the width of the street has been reconsidered, and it is proposed to be at 17 meters with sidewalks on either side and parking on either side, which is certainly something that would be different and slightly wider than the Parkside Way that's south of this area. So as per standard process, notice of the hearing was advertised in the Sunny South News on June 1st and 8th. It was mailed to all surrounding property owners, and by all surrounding property owners, I mean all other properties within the Parkside Acres neighborhood, on May 27th. It was also posted on the Let's Connect webpage on May 27th. As of this evening, there have been no requests to speak at the hearing other than from the developer of the neighborhood, and there has been no written feedback received. So with that, the decision options council may wish to consider are passing the bylaw for second and third reading with or without amendments, tabling it for further consideration, or defeating the bylaw. That concludes my presentation. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Mayor, you're
Go
off.
ahead. Okay, yeah. All right, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question, those lots that were marked in purple there, are they comparable in size to the lots that are there right now?
Through the chair to Councillor Lloyd, thank you for the question. Excellent question. I should have clarified that in the presentation, so my apologies. But yes, there are a fair number of lots in the existing Parkside Acres neighborhood that are R1C. So that's approximately 454 meters squared and larger. Slightly smaller and slightly larger is acceptable as long as it meets the minimum lot requirements in the land use bylaw, which these lots would.
So there's still a demand for smaller lots like that?
Through the chair to Councillor Lloyd, that may be better answered by the developer, as he likely has a slightly better pulse on what the market is looking for these days. But I would suggest that by way of the virtue that, by virtue of the fact that this is before council this evening, there is likely to be demand for it. Otherwise, the developer may not want to put the money in to develop those lots.
True, true. Thank you.
Okay, I see Mr. Boss is on deck. I'll just see if there's any administrative questions of Spencer before we turn the floor over to Mr. Boss. Any other questions of council through to Spencer right now? Okay, I see none, so I'll welcome Mr. Peter Boss to tonight's meeting, and he would like to represent the proponent on this application. So welcome, Peter. You can address council if you wish.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, to get back to Councillor Lloyd's question, is there a demand for single family? Yes, there is. Recently, we have sold a number of them, half a dozen. One just started, so definitely after 2 years, there's some light at the end of the tunnel there. And we just want to continue the single family around this residential multi-units. You know, this is going to be about a 25 unit complex, and we'll just continue the single family around it, which will be a nice fit. So that's what I want to say.
Okay. Then are the townhouses, are they for sale or for rent?
They'll be for sale. They'll be ownership. Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions through to Mr. Boss? Okay, Mr. Boss, do you want to speak to anything else at this time?
No, I think Mr. Coyle, Spencer, he covered it all. I think it's all pretty straightforward. So thank you.
And I'll confirm with Lana that if there's anybody else in the waiting room that that was registered to speak for or against.
No, Mayor, there was no other interest to speak to the matter.
All right, council, this is your last chance to ask any clarifying questions, or let me know if you need more information before considering the second and third readings. So with no indication for any more information required by members of council, I will declare that everybody has enough information to consider second and third reading, and thank Mr. Boss for his time tonight. And we'll consider this in the next part of our agenda, and I will close the public hearing at this time. Thank you very much, everybody. And it is 5:41, and we have another public hearing, and it is land use rezoning bylaw 81P 0521 public hearing, second and third reading. And we will start the public hearing. And again, with an abundance of redundancy, I will go into my introduction. My name is Tim Craig. I will chair this public hearing. All questions and comments shall be directed through me. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is the subject of this hearing. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Anyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter as called upon by myself as chair. Each presenter must state their full name, address, and their interest in this matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given the opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a suggested 3 to 5 minute time limit on the presentation and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous speakers if possible. If new presentation materials are provided, you may be required to email a copy of them to our legislative coordinator. So I will now call on our designated staff member, Melanie Messier, to introduce this topic. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. The following bylaw has been prepared for the redesignation of the lands legally described as Lot 2, Block 20, Plan 9910459, from its current zoning of residential multi-unit R2 to direct control DC. So first reading of the bylaw was passed at the regular council meeting held on May 25th, 2021. Prior to this application, rezoning bylaw 807-P-04-21 was brought forward to council, where the applicant proposed to change the zoning from residential multi-unit R2 to commercial C1. During the circulation of the bylaw, there was feedback from the community indicating concern for the potential of commercial C1 to open up the parcel to commercial C1's broader uses. In response to this, the applicant has chosen to go in a new direction and redesignate the same parcel from residential multi-unit to direct control. So this evening, the bylaw under consideration is bylaw 815-P-0521. where the applicant is proposing a rezoning to make use of the property in a way that aligns with the desired use, while ensuring that council may regulate and control the use of the subject parcel indefinitely. So within the applicant's descriptive narrative, it is identified that the proposed future use is to allow for a future office space for its employees. The applicant has provided a tentative site plan of the building, including the building layout with rough estimates of the total building area. It has also been identified by the applicant that there will be an expected 1 to 2 employees within the office, and they will be working in the Tabor, Coaldale, and Lethbridge area. There's also an expectation of minimal visitors to the office on a daily basis. And it is important to note that no retail operations are going to be taking place at the proposed office. As per the advertising requirements associated with public hearings, the notice of the public hearing was advertised in the Sunny South News for 2 consecutive weeks, and a notice of the hearing was mailed to surrounding properties. As part of an ongoing pilot, it was posted on the Let's Connect Coaldale platform. The bylaw was posted on the project page, and one question was received from a member of the public, and a response was provided by staff to the resident. So for council's knowledge, the question was, why are DC retail stores protected more than schools / childcare facilities, recreation facilities, parks, and playgrounds? Our current land use bylaw prohibits cannabis stores from being closer than 500 meters, but only 300 meters for schools, etc. The children and youth of our town should be protected more than retailers. If bylaw number 815-P-0521 gets rezoned to DC, it will be one of the closest businesses to the new high school site. And that was provided by Danielle Dieck. In response to the question, staff responded, the direct control zoning district is unique in that council is able to regulate the permitted and discretionary uses allowed on a parcel on a case-by-case basis. The applicant for bylaw 815-P-0521 is proposing that the use of the parcel be to allow for an office space with an element of signage. In the past, direct control zoning has been used to permit a retail cannabis shop in another location in town. However, this is not the case with this application. And staff invited the resident to discuss more if they had additional questions, which they did not reach out. An additional question and commentary that was provided by the resident located on the west boundary of the subject parcel included that the proposed new neighbor appears to be accommodating and sensitive towards a long-established neighborhood. A further concern I have seen their plan is the placement of the entrance. As they indicated previously, they also value the tree buffer line. However, my concern is that the sight line to the west could possibly become a future issue. I hope not, as I would never agree to remove any of the trees or foliage which grows wild along the ditch running north and south across my property. I want them to be aware of my concern and stance now versus later. Thank you for addressing my additional concern with Town Council before the meeting on June 14th. And that response and commentary, or that feedback, was provided by Marge McCann. So in response to that, this was shared with the applicant. The applicant did reassure the resident that they would be willing to work with them on the placement of the entrance, that they very much value the tree buffer line, and this is a very tentative site plan at this point in time. So that is all that we have for the commentary regarding this application. So the decision options for council include that subsequent to any consideration of the feedback, that council be respectfully requested to pass land use rezoning bylaw 815-P-0521 for second and third readings with or without amendments, or that council table the application, or lastly, that council defeat the bylaw. It is staff recommendation that council provides second and third reading to land use rezoning bylaw 815-P-0521. And that's all that I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Melanie. Council, do you have any questions to direct to administration? Councilor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. So if these people that are buying it now and they decide their business doesn't work and they want to sell it, do we have any control over who they sell it to? Being a direct control, does that apply for the second time around, or is that just for this sale?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Lloyd. It isn't the applicant who owns this parcel. Subject to this rezoning is whether they'll end up purchasing the land or not. I don't think that we can control who it is sold to, but maybe I may defer to Spencer to see if he has additional clarification on this.
Sure, thanks, Mel, and through the chair to Councillor Lloyd, excellent question. The reality of zoning is that it carries with the land, so any number of purchasers could buy that land, the zoning would stay the same. So for that zoning to change, for the use that would potentially be allowed by way of this direct control zoning to change, that would require a separate process that would be effectively a new zoning application. It would have to go through first reading, be advertised, and then a public hearing would have to be held again. So regardless of who owns this, if the direct control zoning that could potentially be approved tonight were to stay in place, that's how it would be until a future rezoning were to take place.
Councilor Avery?
Thank you, Worship. Is it normal process to change a bylaw to direct control and approve the business all in the same bylaw, or shouldn't it be separated? So we're rezoning to direct control, and then the business comes in after it's been rezoned and looks to see if it's approved.
Certainly, Mel, if I may. Through the chair to Councillor Avery, there is no request for approval of a development permit this evening. It's approval of office space and a signage component to the lot. And then the applicant would have to bring forward a development permit application after the bylaw were potentially to be approved. So it's still the same process as it has been with other direct control zonings.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just in reflection of Councillor Avery's question, I'm under the same position. I think you want to separate the permit application and the zoning situation.
Well, I think that the purpose of this rezoning following the direct control does allow for a number of permitted uses, and I guess conveniently the proposed use stated by the applicant might fall within the permitted uses within direct control that the development officer could actually approve. I don't believe council's being asked to actually approve the actual permitting process, but Spencer, you can probably refine the information a bit further, or Melanie.
Certainly, Lana, could you go to page 255 of the agenda? So just by way of the text in the bylaw itself, it only lists office and 2 types of signs for a permit to be able to be applied for the property. And again, I just want to make it very clear that there's no permit application being brought forward this evening. In fact, with other direct control zonings, the cannabis retail business that was approved and previous direct control zonings for things like Solara by station grounds, the actual approval of the development permit itself is typically delegated to staff, because after the rezoning, the direct control bylaw is so narrow in scope that it's just adding time and process to effectively what council is saying is going to be okay for the property, because it is such a narrow request. Certainly office space can be any number of different things. And in this case, if council would like to see more on what exactly the layout of the site is going to be and what exactly the office space is going to entail, the bylaw could be amended to require that actual development permit application come back to council. However, you could weigh that with the fact that the potential purchaser has already made clear what their intention is for this part of the application when they do choose to make that development permit application and start that part of the process.
Thank you, Spencer. Any other questions? Lana, is there anybody in the waiting room that wants to speak either for or against this bylaw?
No, Mayor, I did not receive any notification that anybody wanted to speak to the matter.
Is Martin Dockian, is he on the call?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Martin is available here to speak to the matter. He is the applicant.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions administratively, so I'll welcome Martin Dock to tonight's meeting, and he is the proponent for this application. And Martin, the floor is yours. That you can present the council, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thanks for the opportunity. And as mentioned very clearly, and Spencer and Mel described it, I'm from Edmonton. Our company home office is in Edmonton. We are really environmental and agricultural concerned company, close to the nature. So we want to have a home in the Coaldale area so that we can have our staff a comfortable office space there instead of working from homes. And there will be minimum disturbance for the neighborhood, we assure, because mostly our guys go to the farms and have meetings with them and do the checks, and that's the type of activities. And we don't have any machines or anything like that to park or create any disturbance for the neighborhood. We are right now in Edmonton. Our office space is there. We are right in the middle of regular businesses, and hardly we have visitors here also.
Are there any questions of council to Martin? I don't see any. Anything else you want to add, Martin?
No, thanks for the opportunity, and we would like to come to the Coaldale neighborhood and make some good relationships over there.
That's good. And from the presentation, it seemed that you've shown a willingness be open to the residents and your new neighbors and be facilitative in accommodating their specific concerns. So on behalf of council, I appreciate that kind of attitude, and that's nice to assuage their concerns early. So council, if there are no more indications of any questions, I will feel that we have enough information to assess this rezoning request, and I'll give you one last crack at questions. Okay, seeing none, I'll thank Martin for joining us tonight, and we will deal with this in a little bit later in our agenda, and I will hereby close tonight's public hearing on this bylaw. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Council.
Okay, now we're at item 4.2, the traffic calming pilot project, proposed public participation plan, and Spencer here is for that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So for this particular item, I'll keep my comments fairly brief, as the bigger piece of the puzzle, which was the approval of the overall pilot project itself or pilot program, was granted by council on May 25th at that regular meeting of council. So this is really step 2, or the second piece of the pilot program that was presented and approved at that meeting. And the public participation part of the traffic calming program required special attention, just because there was a substantial focus placed on that in all of the recommended guidance from the Transportation Association of Canada. And of course, to fit within our public participation policy, we also want to recognize how important that component of the pilot program will be. So Lana, if you could go to page 118 of the agenda. There's a fair amount of preamble that goes into framing the scope of the public participation plan that's being presented this evening. And more importantly, I wanted to present to council that instead of what we might call a typical public participation plan that we would develop on a project by project basis, the proposal before council this evening is to create a little bit more efficiency and flexibility in the engagement process by presenting a plan that is more based around the steps in the pilot program as recommended by the Transportation Association of Canada. So on page 118, we see instead of stage in engagement or stage in the project, there's a column there that says stage in process. So under number 1, it would be initiation. And then 2 is development. 3 on page 119 is approval. 4 is implementation, and so on. So this is mirroring the process that was approved as a part of the traffic calming pilot itself. And really what it does is it lists the suite of tools and resources we have to effectively communicate and work with local residents in an area where a traffic calming request has been made. And this would be something that can be deployed on a case-by-case basis without having to use up a fair amount of time presenting a proposed plan, having council look at it and approve it, and then launching that program. That could add a substantial amount of time to the pilot and be considered relatively inefficient, given that the tools and resources we have for each part of this proposed public participation plan are generally going to be the same or similar for each project. And it also allows us to carry forward with the idea of the pilot and the fact that we can adjust and take a more flexible approach to make better outcomes as we learn more about how the process can be refined. So with that, I'll close my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. Any questions of council to administration? Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just have a question with your stakeholder inventory. It does state on there for Cottonwood and use Cottonwood Drive on a daily basis. I just want to make sure the other 2 roads that we were talking about for the pilot are going to be considered too. So then I'm guessing this one's for Cottonwood Drive, and then the other 2 will have their own statement.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Simpson, excellent catch. That's a clerical error that we can just make clear that's for any project that receives a request at the office. It wouldn't just be for Cottonwood.
Okay. Any other members of the council? Okay, then I would guess that it would be in order if council wishes to approve the P2 plan as amended in the presentation, if that's what council wants to do. Councillor Simpson, you make that motion? Okay, Councillor Simpson makes a motion to approve the P2 plan as amended in tonight's presentation. Any discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, all right, so that's all in favor, so that's unanimous. And so thank you very much, Spencer. And then you're on deck for the next item, and it's the South Coaldale Transportation Network item. So Spencer, I'll let you take it away on this item of business then.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mayor. I do have a brief presentation prepared for this item as well. So I'll go ahead and share that. And a quick technical check. The slide is shown on the screen.
We can see it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So just before we get started with this particular item, there is a fair amount of information here. Really, the presentation I have for council this evening is a culmination of quite a lot of discussion and analysis and consideration for what the transportation network looks like in South Coaldale today and what it could look like in the future as ideas for how this network can be managed are brought forward to council. So I will be moving as quickly as I can, but there is quite a lot of information and I want it to be as comprehensive as possible in recognition of the importance of the information that's being brought forward this evening. So the area of focus is, of course, the two quarter sections that make up the what's locally known as the 30th Avenue quarter section, and then the quarter section with the quads, Fieldstone Meadows, and the Seasons Manufactured Home community. Just as a bit of brief background to set the stage for future items that I'll be sharing with council this evening. The Seasons Area Structure Plan was adopted in 2008, and that initial adoption was based on an agreement to have all traffic use 8th Street as the main access for the community. At that time, the developer was to pave 8th Street after 80% of lots were developed in the Seasons. And as of today, just to briefly touch on the idea of how much time has passed since that 2008 initial approval and today, just shy of 50% of lots have been developed up to this point. In 2016 discussions that were started with the community on the condition of 30th Avenue and the desire for active modes communications. A lot of good information was shared during that period in time. And in 2017, the Seasons community, by way of a formal application, requested removal of the gate in 2017. That gate was approved to be removed by way of an area structure plan amendment. So amending the Seasons area structure plan and the parts of that plan that spoke to the idea of a barrier being in place at 31st Avenue and the main east-west route through the Seasons neighborhood. The amending bylaw was qualified by a number of related motions made at the time that focused on, number one, the construction of 13th Street to the north across the canal, and that was to be completed by October of 2018 by the developer in question in the town, and that did not occur. Further consideration of the gate and extension was deferred at that time until the town completed the transportation master plan, which was ultimately finished in late 2020. And at that time, the transportation master plan outcomes identified that the construction of 13th Street across the canal was not as desirable as first thought due to complexities and costs associated with that. There are also alternative routes that were seen as being able to achieve the same goal as was looked for with connecting 13th Street across the canal. So regarding 30th Avenue, the discussions that spanned 2 years, starting in 2016, were fruitful and resulted in a much clearer understanding of the priorities and areas of concern that those residents had. There's a particular focus on better active modes routes and other upgrades to the transportation network in that part of the community. No capital expenditures have been undertaken in the area up to this point. There has been a small operational expense associated with creating the pathway off the north edge of 30th Avenue that continues to be repainted on a year-over-year basis. 3 notable activities led to the need for discussion that's occurred more recently and that's occurring this evening on this area. Number 1 is the completion and approval of the TMP in late 2020. Number 2 is the recent development interest in a portion of 30th Avenue. And as I'm certain everyone's aware, the northeast 20-odd acres of the 30th Avenue corridor is the specific area of focus for development interest as of late. And the third point is the next phase of the Seasons manufactured home community being subdivided and prepared for development. So in terms of engagement and analysis that's been undertaken through the life cycle of discussion on the transportation network in this area, the engagement was undertaken primarily because of the completion of the TMP as a catalyst for why we need to revisit this item in the context that it's being discussed today. So a public participation plan was prepared and approved on March 22nd by Council. And additionally, analysis and modeling work has been completed in the area to help inform the discussions that will be ongoing for this area. The analysis and modeling work that was completed is evident in the transportation master plan from a broad perspective, and more specifically and in a more focused way. The South Coaldale Transportation Impact Assessment was completed in 2020, 2021. There was a Seasons memo to the South Coaldale TIA, which focused on the question of whether there's capacity in that network in the 30th Avenue area to carry the continued growth of development in the Seasons from a transportation perspective. And then the fourth item is the South Coaldale Transportation Network memo, which was provided by Watt Consulting Group as a way of providing expert oversight on what the recommendations and suggestions are for the network in that area moving forward. So with that, the remainder of the presentation that I have for you this evening will focus on a summary of findings from recently completed stakeholder engagement, from recently completed technical analysis, and a proposed strategy based on the findings from both of those items. The most recent form of engagement undertaken between April and May, which was in the form of a survey, was focused on 3 elements. So number 1, recognizing outcomes from past discussions, inquiring with the community regarding small and large scale elements of the network in South Coaldale, and sharing outcomes from the work that was done on the modeling and analysis side of things. Overall, the survey that was put out to the community was responded to by 88 individuals, and the majority of which were from the study area or the area of focus, and that being the Seasons or 30th Avenue. The feedback could be considered generally heterogeneous, meaning that there wasn't a lot of consistency amongst viewpoints regarding what should and shouldn't change or be enhanced or managed in a particular way moving forward. With that being said, there was consistency with certain questions that were of a particular focus. So in past discussions, this would have been discussions leading up to the renewed discussions we've had this year. Past discussions between 2016 and 2018 focused on matters such as the placement of the gate or the barrier, paving 8th Street, reconstruction of a road along the south boundary of the quarter section, upgrading 30th Avenue and 17th as the main existing roadways in the area, and upgrading other parts of the network as well. Current views on those past discussions included responses from 30 individuals and focused again on paving 8th, a desire for the original area structure plan and agreements to be followed, an idea of allowing 30th Avenue to join 8th Street for public access east-west all the way from 8th Street to 8th Street to Highway 845 and Highway 845 to 8th Street. Constructing a road along the south boundary of the quarter, which is consistent with previous commentary. There was some feedback regarding the idea of making a plan and sticking to it so that there can be consistency with how the network might be managed over the short and long term moving forward. There is also identification of consideration for reinstalling the barrier or in another way, desire to not have the barrier reinstalled. So that commentary was dichotomous in the sense that there was commentary about having the gate reinstalled, and there was certainly commentary about having it not reinstalled. Generally, feedback from this round of engagement was consistent with previous commentary in the area. So in terms of smaller scale elements for what was asked of the respondents to the survey, two of the questions in particular were, how should 17th and 30th Avenue be organized? And what we mean by that is, how should parking and sidewalks and pathways and the driving lanes in these future envisioned redeveloped roads be considered and organized in the roadway there? There's also a second question of what could a possible extension of 13th Street look like? So starting with 17th Street, three options were presented. Option one was as it is today. Option two was a conventional local roadway cross section as borrowed from the City of Lethbridge road design standards, which is the general default for roadway design for many communities in Southern Alberta, and Coaldale being one of those. And then option three was what we would consider a modified local. So it shows, although the image is a little bit small, it shows a separated path, parking on one side, and then a north and south driving lane. So ultimately the feedback was that option three was considered the most preferred from the respondents who ended up completing the survey. In a similar sense, the same type of question was asked for 30th Avenue. And so option one again was what it looks like today. Option two was a full minor collector cross section as per City of Lethbridge design standards. And option three was a modified minor collector, which would be sidewalks on one side or a separated path on one side, parking on both sides, and driving lanes with streetlights. So again, the same feedback was provided for this particular question, which is option three being the preference for the respondents to the survey. Another question was asked regarding a potential extension of 13th Street, which would run from 13th Street where it ends today at the east end of 30th Avenue, not quite to the canal, and then heading west to connect to 17th Street. This is reflected in the transportation master plan, as well as development concepts that have been shared by the development proponents for the two lots in the northeast corner of the 30th Avenue quarter section. So there are a number of points for consideration in this particular potential area for the extension of 13th Street. There are trees, there's an open ditch, there's a pathway on the east side of those trees. So there's a fair amount going on in the area that could be potentially used for an extension of 13th. The question that was posed was based on what's called a Likert scale question. So it's levels of agreement, either full agreement, somewhat agreement, neutral, somewhat disagree, or fully disagree. The first question was that the trees to the east of the area where 13th Street should be extended should be maintained at all costs. 67 of 88 respondents indicated they fully agreed with that statement. The second was whether on-street parking should be prioritized and only if it doesn't impact trees. And 64 of 88 respondents indicated they fully agreed that on-street parking should only be prioritized if it doesn't impact trees. The third question was whether on-street parking should be considered at all, and 51 of 88 respondents said no. There was a final question of whether sidewalks or additional pathways would be considered to be needed here, given that there's already a separated pathway to the east of the trees, and 51 of 88 respondents agreed or strongly agreed with that. For the next portion of the survey, it was quite a robust survey, just to make that comment, because a lot was asked of respondents. So for the 88 individuals who did respond, it was certainly appreciated the time and thoughtfulness that they took to respond to the very comprehensive survey. So for the second part of the survey, 4 scenarios were prepared for the Seasons area in particular. And those scenarios were based on past discussions that had occurred with the residents in the Seasons and the 30th Avenue area. So scenario 1 was as it is today, with unrestricted west access for Seasons community members, and then the clicker gate as it exists today on the 8th Street access to the Seasons. Scenario 2 was as it is today with the extension of 13th and then the new east-west roadway. Scenario 3 was unrestricted access either way, meaning that free-flowing traffic could go east and west through the Seasons and through 30th Avenue. And then scenario 4 was unrestricted access either way, east-west, and the extension of 13th and the east-west roadway that would be potentially constructed as a part of development in that part of the quarter section. The results showed that scenario 4 was the top selection. And there was a 5th scenario that doesn't have a map. It was simply just saying a reinstallation of the barrier at 31st Avenue, and that was voted as the lowest selection. There were also a number of open-ended questions that were provided so that individuals could provide more robust feedback in terms of thoughts or ideas or questions or concerns that they had beyond the other questions that were not as easily responded to from a broader perspective. So the first question was, let us know if you have any other feedback regarding the transportation network in South Coaldale. 28 individuals responded to that question, citing a desire for careful consideration of the best long-term solutions for the area, providing commentary regarding a continued push to connect 13th Street over the canal. And there was also commentary about a desire for pedestrian accommodations in the area with a focus on safety and comfort for non-vehicular users. There was also a visual summary of written commentary provided. And when I say visual summary, what I mean is a number of maps have been put together that reflect the most consistent or most commonly shared feedback in terms of what respondents provided as ideas and suggestions for how the network could be managed over the longer term. So 4 options were identified. And we'll just go through each one of those individually. Option A was the idea of connecting Highway 845 to 8th Street by way of some form of connection from 30th Avenue down 13th Street and then through to the east. Suggestion B was reinstallation of the barrier. Suggestion C was a slight extension to the south along the existing undeveloped road allowance at 13th Street, and then the development of a new east-west road that would be probably 32nd Avenue. So that's how it's been termed in some of the information in the summaries of feedback provided for council and the community. And then suggestion D was connecting 13th Street across the canal. So in these images that were shared as a part of the summary of feedback that have been shared with the community on the Let's Connect page, suggestion D was clarified that this particular suggestion has already been decided upon as a part of the March 22nd council meeting, where council made it clear that the decision on 13th Street, if it were to be extended, would be that it would be extended partway up and then connecting east-west to 17th Street, and that it would not cross the canal. And again, that's due to concerns and constraints based on complexities and costs associated with pushing 13th all the way across the canal. So summarizing the 4 technical items completed for the area is another important component of the information sharing this evening. So again, I'll try to move quickly through these, but still hit the most important points from these items. So again, we have 4 items here for council's consideration: the transportation master plan, the area TIA, the seasons memo to the TIA, and the South Coaldale network memo. Findings are organized by first network recommendations, and then secondly, cross-section recommendations. And cross-section is the idea of how to organize the street. Where does parking go? Where do driving lanes go? Things like that. I should make it clear that the bullet points we see on the screen here and the summary of bullet points on the left-hand side of the screen are from the technical recommendations provided by WAC Consulting Group. We do have our representative Bruce Nelligan here with us this evening, who can speak to some of this after I've finished my presentation, and in particular if council has any specific questions on these parts of the presentation. So in terms of short-term recommendations, one of them was connect Highway 845 to 8th Street through 31st Avenue. A longer-term suggestion, which is in the context of 20, 30, 40 years from now, when development occurs in the south and east parts of the community, very likely after a next annexation, would be developing 32nd Avenue, which is at the south end of the quarter sections we've been discussing this evening. There was also a recommendation that the 13th Street extension is reasonable, but potentially not quite as valuable as using the same funds to upgrade 30th Avenue and connecting the whole area east to west by connecting 8th Street to Highway 845. There's also a suggestion that it's worth protecting 8th Street for a major collector roadway at some point in the long term. And again, that could be 20 to 40 years from now. Certainly it's going to be development dependent for the most part, but it's likely that after the lands from our current annexation have filled and the communities grown to that point, that development would occur further south and east at some much further point in the future. So for that reason, the protection of 8th Street for a major future roadway would make sense, according to our transportation consultants. And then the final item was a general comment that as development occurs in this context, in these areas, developers should pay their fair share as development continues. Now, I also have a number of recommendations from the consultants indicating what they would, how they would go from the resident feedback or the respondent feedback for 17th Street to what they would actually suggest for a specific layout for what that street could look like in the future if it were to be redeveloped. So what the consultants are recommending is a 3-meter multi-use path on one side, a 1.5-meter sidewalk on the other, and a 7.5 to 8-meter asphalt surface for 2 driving lanes and potentially parking on one side, with standard curb and gutter and potential for street trees. Now, with this and the other items that I'll be discussing after this, it's important to note that within the broader planning process for the reconstruction of these roads, it's recommended that we would have to do a fair amount more work to go from concept to final design for what these roads will look like. So we would certainly need to consider local stormwater considerations and other technical issues to make sure that the cross sections that do end up getting constructed here are contextually appropriate. So for 30th Avenue, the recommendation was very similar to 17th, with a slightly wider driving and parking lane because of the higher order roadway that this represents. The suggestion is a 3-meter multi-use pathway on one side, 1.5 meter sidewalk on the other, an 11-meter asphalt surface for 2 travel lanes and 2 parking lanes, or a slightly narrower surface if 1 parking lane were to be considered appropriate, again with standard curb and gutter and the potential for street trees. And just quickly to note, there was a fair amount of commentary on creating safe active modes accommodations for 31st Avenue and 13th Street, given that currently there is roadway and ditches here and no real separate area for pedestrians and cyclists and other active modes users. So the consultants shared an image from the city of Calgary where they quite frequently make use of vertical flexible bollards and some form of horizontal delineation between driving and parking lanes, and then a potential for an active modes lane, all within the same asphalt surface. So that's something that has been considered for 30th Avenue and could be considered for other areas as well. Again, I need to bookend that comment with the fact that further design consideration would have to be given for how much right-of-way we currently have and what would actually be feasible in that sense. But that could be a next step in the work that needs to be done in this area, if it is something that would be considered to be worthwhile by council. So ultimately what was done with all of the recommendations that were provided by our consultant and with all of the suite of information we have with the engagement feedback and technical information was a single image showing what the recommendations and suggestions are on a go forward basis for this area. So network recommendations included 32nd Avenue and an extension of 13th Street, protecting 8th Street for future major collector construction, considering the options that exist for the funds that are involved with extending 13th Street, and just ensuring that that decision that's made is one that reflects the best value for dollar. And that's certainly a point for consideration and further discussion as the network continues to be a point of focus for council and the community. There's also a note that's the suggestion of connecting Highway 845 to 8th Street is something that would have to be discussed and deliberated with and negotiated with the developer and the Seasons community and the town to figure out if and how that could work. And then there's of course a recommendation for the cross sections at 17th and 30th that we've already reviewed. And finally, for active modes recommendations in the network. For those areas of the network that do not have active modes right of way, it was recommended that pathways and or sidewalks should be introduced to ensure active modes users are accommodated throughout the network in this part of the community. A few more points for council's consideration, and then I should be able to conclude in the next couple of minutes. So I certainly appreciate everyone's patience as we take our time working through this. Recommendation number one from a time and budgetary consideration perspective is using an asset management approach. So in this particular case, that could mean recognizing that, for instance, a sanitary main line between Highway 845 and 17th Street is slated for replacement in the next 5 years. There's also the Malloy Phase 2B project that would be making use of the raw water drinking reservoirs at some point in the next 0 to 5 years. And with all of those things being considered, the favorable impact the adjustment of stormwater flows would make stormwater less of a concern for 30th Avenue, and the pipeline replacement and then the road itself being upgraded could all occur at one time to make best use of the dollars that are available for that project and the different pressures from different projects that are needed, just to ensure project timing is as efficient as possible. Again, thinking of that from a 17th Street perspective, there's certainly an opportunity to discuss with potential developer of the Northeast and other parts of the area what cost sharing could look like to upgrade 17th Street sooner rather than later. There's also a focus or a consideration for a focus on prioritizing active modes. So what that could look like with introducing active modes right of ways on 31st Avenue and 13th Street. And just highlighting that there's certainly a desire to have east-west access in this area maintained. And that can be considered a part of the discussions when it comes to what the costs and construction needs may look like when introducing active modes in that part of the network. There's also an idea that new information could be adapted should council wish. So the 13th Street extension, again, is of value for certain parts of the network. There also may be benefit to discussing if some of those dollars could go towards upgrading 30th Avenue sooner rather than later. And again, I just want to highlight the benefit of having this feedback from the residents of the 30th Avenue and the Seasons area, and the fact that we now have as much of a basis for understanding priorities and concerns and suggestions for moving forward from a community perspective as we do from a technical perspective, which is always a healthy thing to be able to work through these types of projects. So in summary, certainly tensions can arise in underdeveloped parts of a community, but again, engagement for getting through some of the difficult parts of the discussions that hopefully end up with the best way forward. Engagement is critical to those things. Feedback has not and will likely not ever be homogenous in this area in terms of a one-size-fits-all solution that everybody can agree with. And that certainly leads into the idea that there's really no answer that will please everyone and all parties at the same level. So instead, the proposed strategy that's been presented this evening was intended to balance feedback with the best outcomes for the network in the short and long term. And feedback is always looked at as how can it be used, and then where can it be introduced, and where can it be actioned in the areas of a project that we can implement the more salient points from feedback in. So that's certainly something that's been considered with this area of the community. So as for a recommendation or a suggested path moving forward, the council certainly may wish to consider approving the proposed strategy and requesting that staff organize the strategy and look for budgetary and temporal aspects of what the strategy represents and bring that back for further information or further consideration. Or certainly given the amount of the volume of information that's been shared this evening, it would be just as reasonable to table this for further consideration, and staff would definitely appreciate where there may be a desire for more information or a different perspective on the information that's been collected up to this point. And then as a separate but related item, council may wish to consider addressing motions 298.17 and 303.18, both referring to whether or not the gate should be placed back where it previously was prior to 2017. Or again, just given the volume of information shared this evening, it would certainly be appreciated by staff if that were to be tabled to know specifically what additional information council may wish to have prior to moving forward with future direction on these items. And with that, I'm finally done. And I, again, thank you for your patience and your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or for those that I can't answer, I'll certainly ask Bruce to weigh in on what his thoughts are.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. I'll open up the floor to council for any questions that they may have. I can't see everybody's, okay, there we go. Thank you. So if members of council, Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Your Worship. So through to Spencer. So there's a development happening in there. Is there any urgency in getting this done? If we table it, is that going to create a problem with people that wanting to develop that area right now?
Through the chair to Councillor Lloyd, certainly if enough time were to elapse between this evening and when final direction or continued direction were to be provided, that could become an issue. However, another item this evening for council's consideration is first reading of a bylaw that relates to the development concept for the area. The public hearing for that item is scheduled for, or will be, if council chooses to pass that for first reading, scheduled for July 12th. So there would be time to collect additional information and provide any other information council wishes to consider along with consideration of the development concept itself. I would say, given the amount of information we have, we should be able to gather any additional points that council wishes to consider rather quickly, and hopefully continue moving down the path of identifying a firm strategy for the network in the area.
Anybody else? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, and through to Spencer. With regards to the developer, would you need some more information or dialogue with the developer in terms of trying to connect 8th Street, whether it be via 31st Avenue or create an alternate pathway?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, most certainly that would likely take a fair amount of deliberation and negotiation. One thing to consider would be, should staff receive direction from council that that's something to explore, then those discussions can start sooner rather than later to see if there's any possibility of that recommendation being carried forward.
Councillor Home.
Thank you, Your Worship. Given all the discussion and the number of times we've discussed this whole project, etc., I am strongly in support of us going ahead with, I think it was option 3, the one with the walkway on the one side and 2 lanes of traffic and parking on one side for both 30th and 17th, and leave all the rest of the options to be tabled until a future date. Could be 20 years from now when we actually need to have a direct connection to 8th Street, but I would strongly support us going forward with 30th and 17th Street.
Mayor, I don't know if I might just weigh in briefly.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I think I might just ask Bruce to provide a bit of commentary on the urgency of need for that east-west connection with respect to Councillor Holmes' question or a comment, I guess, as to how, at what point in the future that connection may be needed. I'm not certain that it's a short-term or long-term need, so I might just have Bruce weigh in terms of, should development continue to occur in this area, what is the necessity for that connection, and what that timeline look like?
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. So I think in terms of the need for the requirement of 32nd Avenue connection between 845 and 8th Street, I think it really depends on the pace of the development in South Coaldale. Certainly, as development proceeds at the very south end, so on the north side of 32nd, I think that would be an opportunity for the town to look to the developers to build portions of that roadway. But I think most importantly, it would be a benefit to the town to make sure that they protect the right of way for that roadway. But timing, I think we haven't really modeled much beyond the South Coaldale area itself. But if the development were to proceed south of there, I think it'd be pretty important to have that in conjunction with any new development south of there. But if it was just the South Coaldale area, I think that it could be serviced with 30th Avenue as long as it connected over to 8th Street. But it would probably see volumes that are quite a bit higher than they are today, just because that would be the only connection in and out of the area to Highway 845.
Mayor, if I may, I think I may have misunderstood Councillor Holmes' question or comment regarding the timing. I had thought through the chair to Councillor Holmes that you were discussing the idea of connecting 30th or Highway 845 to 8th Street by way of 30th potentially through the seasons.
And that I'm not sure that I would support that at this time. I think we're a long ways from getting up to, I'm not the traffic expert, but the total numbers, we're going to be much, much, much lower on 30th Avenue, looking at the potential for development there than what we already are at Cottonwood Drive. And so I'm not sure why we would be pushing to connect to 8th Street when 90% of our traffic goes west.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification.
Well, I'm supportive of the concept that Councillor Holm puts forward on 17th and 30th. I think that, with the timing of our looking at the area structure plan for South Coaldale, I think that might be a little bit early in the process to necessarily commit to the fulsome project at this time, depending on what the public feedback is on the actual open house on the area structure plan and whatnot. There might be more stronger viewpoints expressed during that process, and that might impact our decision-making process. And I like the concept of what was put forward in the discussion tonight about development paying for the development kind of thing. So that'll have a nuanced approach to how we approach the revised area structure plan as well. So I do support in the long run, some upgrades to 30th and to 17th as you comment, but I'm just not certain that we're at the right time of the discussion, and might be a little premature until we see how the area structure plan modification progresses on between tonight and the public hearing on July the 12th, if that's the way it goes. But that's just my thought.
Certainly, thank you, Mayor. If I may just make one more comment, specifically regarding your focus on what the proceedings could look like regarding the area structure plan amendments that are going to be brought forward. I can share, it might be a little bit out of sequence, but the summary of information is already up on the town's webpage that's hosted all of the community feedback for the South Coaldale ASP revision. And that certainly didn't result in 100% agreement from the residents of the area, but there was a fair amount of consistency with wanting the cross sections to be updated and reorganized as has been presented this evening. So I just wanted to make that one point of clarification.
I guess the one thing that I've kind of found over time is that when you have some movement to pushing for an area structure plan, that that might incentivize stalled property owners from that might re-look at what they might do with the properties in that area, and that might stimulate more conversation and might necessitate a little bit more thought process on how the property introduced the transportation plan for South Coaldale. Councilor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I get the impression that administration would like to have a little bit more time and they would prefer us to table this, so I will make the motion to table it.
Okay, Spencer?
Thank you, Mayor. Is there anything specific that council would be looking for in terms of more detailed or different information than what was presented this evening?
Councilor Pauls?
Come on. Would you have some time to come over to my place and tell me how you're gonna widen that road? Please, because 2-dimension does not work. You gotta look at 3 dimensions. Would you be all right with that?
Through the chair to Councillor Pauls, I think what you're asking is whether we've considered the design components of actually implementing those roads.
Yeah,
Okay.
and the elevations, and whether or not we could drop down 845 so we wouldn't have to, we'd have more room to go sideways. I was thinking about that, and I was just wondering if, well, 845 is an Alberta road, but it's in Coaldale, so we should be able to do that.
Well, we can certainly, and through the chair to Councillor Pauls, we can certainly put more time into what some of the design considerations would result in, whether there are some feasibility issues with some of the components discussed this evening, or what it would actually take to implement them.
Alrighty, thank you.
Well, I think that's merits certainly a lot of consideration on the actual practical way people along 30th can, especially on the south side, can actually access 30th Avenue, and that if we make widening changes and whatnot. And so I think it's, that's a design element that, I would probably need more information on to make sure that the existing property owners can actually get in and out of their lots without high centering as they enter 30th kind of thing. And so and I'm sure our engineers and trustee administration people have given lots of thought on that, but maybe a little bit more illustrative stuff on how that works would be helpful. So we do have a tabling motion by Councillor Lloyd, and when would you consider that it should be brought back after July 12th meeting, or at the July 12th meeting, or I guess we'll have the consideration of that revised area structure plan then, and it might take a little while to, would the August meeting be enough time to administratively work with more of this, Spencer, or is that too late?
I think with an August meeting, Mayor, you might be describing a special meeting. I don't know that any are currently scheduled for August.
Well, normally we have one in the last, the 4th Monday of August. But I'm just, administratively, how can you deal with, what time would be a good time for this to resurface on the agenda to functionally deal with it?
Mhm. I think given that we're just shy of a month, 4 weeks away from July 12th, we can certainly gather what we can in the next 3 weeks. And then if we're able to, we could place the item on the agenda for consideration at that time. And if we're not able to get to a point where we have more to share, we could just provide an information update, letting council know exactly when we would have that additional information ready to go.
So is that satisfactory, Councillor Lloyd, to table to tentatively the July 12th meeting then? Lana?
I just wanted to add more that there is no council meeting in August, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I believe the next one is September 12th, around that part, 12, 14.
Okay, all right. So July 12th meeting it is then, I would think. Okay, Councillor Lloyd's motion to table till the July 12th meeting, and if we don't have a fulsome report at that time, at the minimum, we'll have an information update at July 12th with regard to this then. So I'll call the question. All in favor of Councillor Lloyd's tabling motion? Councillor, oh, you're in favor? Okay. And everybody's in favor? That's unanimous for the tabling motion then? All right, thank you. And we got that. Now we can go to item 7.1. The ATCO natural gas franchise fee bylaw.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening, everyone. So we have bylaw 800-AG-01-21, the natural gas franchise fee bylaw. First reading was presented and approved by council on the February 8th, 2021 meeting. Since then, the bylaw has been advertised for 2 weeks in the Sunny South News. No comments or objections were received. Subsequent to that, it was passed along to the fine folks at ATCO, and then it was presented to the Alberta Utilities Commission, which the bylaw was fully approved by the Alberta Utilities Commission. With those steps being completed, the final step in this new agreement is to present council with second and third readings of the bylaw. Note there's been no changes or amendments since this was last discussed with council on February 8th. With that being said, I'll turn this back to council for any questions they may have.
Council, are there any questions through the administration? I don't see any then. This is just administrative and there's no fee increases incorporated into the new bylaw. It's just a renewal kind of a process at this
Correct.
time.
It's just a renewal of the agreement and isn't tied to the franchise fee rates.
Okay, so if nobody has any questions, we might entertain second and third reading if that's a desire of council. Councillor Chapman?
I'll move for second reading.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Chapman for sponsoring the second reading of the bylaw. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous then. That's 7 votes in favor. And then we have a third reading if anybody wants to sponsor that. Councillor Avery sponsors third reading of the bylaw. Thank you. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously as well. So thank you, Kyle, for that. And then we have item 7.2, the public notification and advertising bylaw 814R05-21. And we have Leah here. You have anything further to say, Leah?
I do not, Mayor Craig.
Okay. So then we are at a point in the meeting where we can also entertain second and third reading of this bylaw, if that's your desire. Counselor Simpson moves second reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous as well. Thank you. And we can entertain third reading if that's your desire. Counselor Pauls makes a motion to support the third reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's all 7 of us unanimously on third reading. So then we'll enter into item 7.3, land use rezoning bylaw 815P0521. And Melanie, do you want to make any further comments on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just again wanted to clarify for the application, the reason why the applicant provided so much additional information was because of the original response to the initial bylaw. So he wanted to make it as clear as possible, his intentions for the parcel. But that's all the comments that I have on that.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, and then we're again in the position of taking second and third reading of that bylaw. Councillor Lloyd?
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
Mark was concerned about the tree line. Are those trees on her property or are they on this property that we're talking about?
She was referring to the trees on her property.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Home? You're
Just have one question, I guess, and I was going to bring it up earlier when we were at the other session. What is the real reason why we're going to direct control on this? I know that direct control, there's no appeals afterwards if somebody puts an application for something that somewhat fits into this, but I guess I don't understand why we would have direct control instead of waiting for the application for specific use and then agree with it or not agree with it.
administration? Spencer?
Thank you, Councillor. The reason why we decided to go with direct control was so that we could limit the use just to the office space and not open it up to the broader options for commercial C1. From the initial circulation of bylaw 807, there was a few residents that had concern with an office space being there. And then say, for instance, if it was to be purchased by another developer, that it could potentially become something else that wasn't consistent with the area.
Thank you, Melanie. Any more questions, or does anybody care to sponsor a second reading? Councillor Chapman?
I'll move for second reading.
Okay, we have that motion on the table by Councillor Chapman. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and we have 6 in favor, and is any opposed? Councillor Avery's opposed. Okay. And then we can entertain third reading tonight if that's your wish. Councillor Pauls moves for third reading. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, so we have 5 in favor, opposed. Okay, we have Councillor Holm and Councillor Avery opposed. Okay, that's carried then. All right, and then we have item 7.4, land use rezoning bylaw -P-05-21, entertaining second and third readings. And Spencer, do you want to address that?
Thank you, Mayor. I have no other comments to make and am happy to answer any final questions council might have.
Thank you. Are there any final questions of council, or do you want to move to second and third reading? Councillor Holm?
I would move second reading.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Holm that sponsors second reading. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's all 7 of us. That's unanimous. Councillor Simpson?
I'll move for third reading.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Councillor Simpson sponsoring third reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that's all 7, so that's unanimous as well. Thank you very much. And then we have item 7.5, Assessment Review Board Bylaw 818-AP-06-21. And we have Spencer Coaldale here for that. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for allowing me to speak on so many items this evening. It wasn't planned, but it's just the way it turned out. So for this particular item, the Regional Assessment Review Board is something that the town has been a part of for quite some time. It's led by the Oldman River Regional Services Commission. They provide clerkship services, and the regional component of the board allows for a number of a number of board members from different municipalities to make up the board that hears any one particular complaint on the or appeal on the assessment side of things. So it's quite a robust format. And although we're not a part of the Regional Services Commission for planning services anymore, recent changes to the regulations around how they can operate have allowed them to continue to provide services such as this. There is a $500 a year fee, and it's something that, just given the amount of board members that could now be required and the amount of training that's required for board members and clerks for assessment reviews and assessment appeals, it would certainly be the recommendation of staff that the amending bylaw that's before council this evening and the approval of the yearly fee be approved, so that this appeal service can be provided to local residents who take issue with their assessments, and there isn't a substantial burden on staff and potential board members from the community to have to get trained up in areas where we already have that expertise at a regional scale. So the reason the amending bylaw is before council this evening is to change some of the critical wording that's changed with new Municipal Government Act requirements for assessment appeals. And specifically, it's focusing on a need for 2 separate types of appeals and appeal boards. There's now a composite appeal board that hears appeals that are larger than 3 properties or for commercial and industrial properties. And then there's a local board that hears appeals for fewer than 3 properties or residential properties. So that's part of the reason that we're talking about, or that I'm suggesting that we continue with the regional model, just because of the scale of the work involved with allowing representation for these boards. And with that, I'll conclude my remarks and answer any questions council may have.
Are there any questions for you, Spencer, then? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Through to Spencer. On this matter, can Councillor Simpson and myself vote on that? We're part of the appeal for that.
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, I'm sorry I didn't catch the last part of the item that you were discussing, Councillor Chapman. Would you be able to repeat your question?
Councillor Simpson and myself would not be in conflict for voting here.
Right. Again, through the chair, are you thinking because of your positions on the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board?
That's correct.
Okay, so these are 2 totally separate boards focused on separate components of governance. So my opinion would be that there's no issue with conflict, but if anyone else on the administration side would like to weigh in on that, they're certainly welcome to do so.
Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one quick word. I think the bylaw talks that we're going to give our CAO the decision making on who goes on this. Is that going to be a lot of time for a CAO, or is this something that maybe yourself or one of their other managers should be taking on, so we don't add one more burden to our CAO that is unnecessary?
Certainly, through the chair to Councillor Holm, thank you for that comment. I think just based on the volume of items that I have for council this evening, there might have been some confusion. For this particular item, it's just allowing the Regional Services Commission to continue using the regional board. And there's a separate item for subdivision and development clerkship and appointing a clerk to the subdivision and development appeal board that would be recommended to be delegated to the CAO. And for that particular item, I think that might come up next on the agenda, but that would be a very small piece of the work that the CAO would have to manage. But of course, we can discuss that when that comes up.
Sorry, I got ahead of you.
Councillor Lloyd?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. So you're looking for a motion to approve the Regional Assessment Review Board involvement for like $500 a year? I can make that motion. I can make that motion if that's what you're looking for.
Sorry for the interruption. Also for amending the bylaw, that could be amended over 3 readings, but there's a need to amend the bylaw as well.
Okay.
Okay, so Councillor Lloyd, you're making the motion to authorize membership and the payment of the annual fee of $500 then?
That's right.
Okay, any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's all 7 of us, that's unanimous. And would anybody want to sponsor first reading of the amended bylaw? Councillor Chapman moves for first reading. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's all 7 of us, unanimous. We can entertain second reading if you like. Councillor Simpson moves second reading. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's 7 of us in favor. That's carried unanimously. We can entertain all 3 readings if somebody wants to sponsor the motion for unanimous consent. Councillor Chapman, you made the motion for unanimous consent. All in favor? Okay, and that's approved unanimously. So we can look at third reading then. Councillor Chapman moves to sponsor third and final reading of the amended bylaw. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And then we have 7.6 land use rezoning bylaw 819-P-06-12 and first reading by Cam Mills will introduce that topic. Welcome, Cam.
Well, thank you. Appreciate council's time getting on this obviously very busy agenda this evening. So what we're presenting here this evening is first reading of a proposed land use rezoning bylaw 819-P-06-21, which is to redesignate the lands which are legally described as Plan 181-1685, Block 21, Lot 3, from its existing industry I zoning to direct control DC zoning. The property in question is owned by the town of Coaldale, so this is located in the industrial park. For reference, this is on the northern end of the industrial park within our larger lot blocks, approximately 3.5 acres in size. And this would be 2 lots to the west of where the new site of Bethel Windows is currently being constructed, so to provide that frame of reference. And what is being proposed here is a rezoning, so again, of a piece of land that the town currently owns, where we have a purchase agreement being developed that will be entered into shortly. So the town is currently in the process of finalizing a sale agreement for this lot. And in addition to the agreement for the sale of the lands to 2.0 Limited, we're also talking about entering into an operating agreement associated with that sale. And the idea there is that 2.0 Limited would agree to provide the town with services associated with the lot, which would include tipping for recycling waste, so blue bin drop off here within the town, as well as operating a year-round yard waste disposal sites. We currently have a temporary facility located at the arena. This would be operated full-time there at this site, and then also talking about some green power options, some renewable energy options associated with those uses. And the purpose of rezoning to direct control from industrial is actually, in this case, it's almost a technical thing, but it's to allow for actually a smaller range of available uses on the parcel than would otherwise be allowed. So you'll note that the bylaw in question, in terms of the allowances for direct control, in form and function in many, many ways, is going to mirror the industrial zoning, simply allowing for a smaller range of uses. And this is advantageous for the town, first of all, given that the proposed uses are going to be tied to some necessary town services. And so it ensures that the owner operator, the current and future owner operators of the facility, continue to provide those services and helps provide some security to the town for that, as discussed as part of that operating agreement. And from the buyer's perspective, the rezoning allows for direct input from council into the approval process in terms of approving of the use, and also help streamline the process for them. So the proposed bylaw would allow for a recycling facility. It would allow for renewable energy uses, as well as signage associated with those uses and accessory uses, which are associated with those as well. And all other aspects of the industry zoning would be included. So setback requirements, design standards, landscaping requirements, everything else associated with our existing industrial zoning would be applied here. And the bylaw also establishes for administration to be the decision-making authority on permits for these uses. And so what that would mean is, should the bylaw be adopted, a permit for the listed use would be issued by administration, and any requests for uses outside of the very limited scope of the bylaw would require the applicant to come back to council for amendment to that bylaw. So as the business model evolves, if there's an opportunity to expand the business into a new area that is different from what's being done there, they would simply have the opportunity to come back to council and speak to that, and council would have the opportunity to consider that directly at that time. Provided first reading is granted, we'll have the opportunity to advertise for a public hearing, and then we would look forward to bringing this back on the July agenda. And at that time, the applicant would also have an opportunity to speak to council and to the public about the specifics of the proposal with respect to the proposed use and how that would work. So with that, our recommendation is to provide for first reading of the bylaw, and also to establish a time for a public hearing at the July council agenda. With that, I'll pass it back to yourself, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Cam. I'll open the floor to members of council that have any questions of you. When given what you described, I believe it's also implied that any other permitting that requires any other provincial oversight would also be involved with any plan as well, right?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. Yes, so anything associated with any environmental standards would be dealt with through the appropriate provincial agencies. Obviously, safety codes are going to be respected and required to be followed through our permitting agency as well there. So just as it would be in the industrial zoning, the difference being that the zoning provides for a very limited use, so you can't do things like a truck wash or any of those other fertilizer storage or any other number of uses as implied from the existing bylaw.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Lloyd.
Thank you, Your Worship. So Cam, this does not include the green bins, right?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, no, at this time, what's simply being talked about is a facility that would accept the tipping of the town of Coaldale's blue bin materials from within our own collection stream, as well as the processing of certain non-inert materials from other sources, mostly construction and demolition waste. So, carpet and woods and things like that from Coaldale as well as surrounding municipalities as part of their mix. And I'm sure the applicant would be happy to speak to the specifics of that at the hearing, but we're not talking about a facility for the town of Coaldale's green bin program. So the green bin would continue to be delivered to Tabor through the GFL facility that's located there, and the black bin would continue to be delivered to the dump at the city of Lethbridge.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Holm?
Again, I'm gonna throw out the same question on this one. Again, why direct control? From what I understand from this particular company and their proposal here, it fits completely within the designation of any of the lots in the industrial park. So why would we be pushing for direct control on this when it already meets the requirements of our industrial park?
Yep, thank you for the question, Councillor Holmes. So as we had discussed in the staff report, one of the key reasons for that is that providing for the limited scope of uses provides the town with greater security against that operating agreement, because it's going to limit the uses on the site where the operating agreement is attached to those uses that are part of the operating agreement. So it doesn't allow for the conversion of the lot to some other use like a dog kennel or a truck wash or something of that nature, which isn't tied to the provisions of those services that are associated with the town's uses. So it's going to have the yard waste drop-off site, it's going to have the recycling facility, it's going to be limited in scope to those things.
Councillor Simpson, did you have a question?
I was just going to move for first reading.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Simpson for first reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that establishes the July 12th public hearing date and sets the motion advertising. So away we go. All right, and then we have item 7.7. Spencer really wanted to be a big part of tonight's agenda, so we'll let him have one more item coming up here.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. You are correct. So for item 7.7, this is the proposed South Coaldale revised area structure plan amending bylaw 820-P-06-21. And I'm not going to read the report verbatim. There's quite a bit in there. Really, the intent for this evening is to bring the information presented forward and ask for consideration of first reading so that a public hearing can be scheduled for the July 12th council meeting at 5:20 p.m. Beyond that, there's going to be a substantial amount of effort put into summarizing and providing a significant amount of detail on all of the engagement work provided, the service and considerations for the lots, and what the actual amendment is made up of. So at this time, I would ask if there's a desire for any more information before passing it back to council. And beyond that, of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Spencer. Are there any clarification requirements of council or questions? Go ahead, Spencer.
Thank you, Mayor. I just also wanted to note that one of the reasons a fair amount of time was put into summarizing the information we do have at this time relating to the proposed amendment is that we then take this staff report and we make it a part of the Let's Connect Coaldale webpage that would be built for this particular proposal, which gives the community and interested stakeholders more information in a briefer summary than having to read through all of the individual documents that the summary represents. So that was another reason for the substantial amount of time put into this summary. And so that'll make up a part of the information that everyone has access to after this evening.
Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will make the motion for first reading.
Okay, you have a motion. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, we have, okay. So we have 7 in favor then, as far as I can tell. If anybody was opposed, please let me know. But my eyesight says that we had 7 hands in favor, so I'll declare that unanimous, and so that will set in motion that advertising piece and the engagement piece, and the public hearing will be set for July 12th. And then we have item 7.8 for bylaw 8Q1-P-06-21 Spruce Woods. And we can entertain first reading because there's a road closure. Go ahead, Spencer.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So as you've mentioned, this is a proposed road closure bylaw. Specifically, this is for a set of properties in the community that were annexed in 2018. And as a result of a number of constraints that the property owners have run up against, the proposal before council this evening shows a desire to have Spruce Woods Haven Road and Spruce Woods Grove Road closed, which of course requires the broader road closure process to be initiated. I should also note that as a part of these roads being closed, the individuals who own the property would like to consolidate the existing 10 lots into 3 lots total, which means there would be no loss of access for any future lots in that regard. And it's really just a matter of making the best use of the property they have with the constraints that they have in place at this time.
Thank you, Spencer. Are there any questions through this, Spencer? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Spencer, for the life of me, I'm trying to figure where this is.
Certainly, thank you, Councillor Chapman. So this is south of Cottonwood Estates at the south boundary of the town on the west side of Highway 845.
Okay.
So if it gets first reading, then we send it to transportation, they review it and say that we can proceed further unless they have concerns.
Correct. That's generally the idea. So we would set a public hearing date for July, and then once that has been advertised and the public hearing has been held, we would send all of that information along with first reading to the province for their consideration and ideally approval.
Councillor Holm?
I'd move first reading.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor Pauls?
Unmute yourself, Butch.
I might have somebody in there looking at buying, so I'll just back out of this one, okay? I didn't know we were going to do that, and I'm not sure if Richard's going to be in it, and so I'll just not vote. Okay?
That's fine. So the record will show that Councillor Pauls wishes to abstain from the vote for a perceived conflict.
One point, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
If Councillor Pauls is going to recuse himself from voting, recuse himself from council chambers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, so the record will show that Councillor Pauls has left the screen. And we have the motion on the floor and by Councillor Holm for first reading. All in favor? Okay, that's approved by the 6 remaining members of council with 1 abstention. Okay, I will text Butch and let him know that he can re-enter the scene. Okay, there he is. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Pauls. All right, now we get to go down to section 8 now. And in keeping with the long tradition of tonight, Spencer Coyle will introduce the appointment of a SDAB clerk. Spencer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So this is regarding the appointment of a clerk to the role of the SDAB, and this requires consideration because in bylaw 795-P-12-20, the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board bylaw, section 8.1 indicates that a clerk has to be appointed to that role, and that's also an expectation in the MGA. So as a matter of housekeeping, you could call it, we do have a member of staff who's been trained up in the clerkship role for the SDAB, and as a matter of process, they now either need to be appointed by council or by way of the allowances in bylaw 795. They could also be appointed by way of council delegating that authority to the CAO. And in reference to Councillor Holmes' comments earlier, because there's only 1, ideally 2 members of staff that are going to fulfill that role at any one point in time, it's really just a matter of the CAO drafting a letter that says, I hereby appoint staff member X to the role of SDAB clerk. So it's not too much additional work in that regard. And it certainly makes things a little bit easier in terms of the processes required for council and or the CAO to weigh in on.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. That's pretty clear to me. Any questions or concerns? Councillor Holm?
I'd move that we follow the administration's recommendation on this.
Okay, and Councillor Holm moves the recommendation that council delegate the authority to appoint a clerk to the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, the SDAB, to the CAO. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's 7 in favor. That's unanimous. All right, and then we have item 8.2, and that is Cindy Hoffman to present on staff report with regard to potential settler days. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. The following report is to provide Council with options and recommendations for Settler Days 2021 activities and to ask for approval or modification of the recommendation. These options and this recommendation are unique to 2021 because of the continued presence of COVID-19 and the recent announcement of the Alberta Open for Summer plan. The 2021 Settler Day celebration is normally scheduled this year for July 3rd. Due to the continued presence of COVID-19 and because of the provincial reopening strategy of lifting restrictions is early in its implementation, holding a community event as early as July 3rd could pose potential risks in regards to the spread of the virus. The Community Services Department would like to recommend that a Party in Coaldale celebration be planned for the weekend of August 6th and 7th just to allow for a bit more time to observe how the community is affected by Alberta's Open for Summer plan. We would also like to recommend that the weekend festivities include the movie night in the park, and also in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, include the Main Street Rejuvenation Project celebration, giving the community an opportunity to celebrate the new look and feel of the area. There were a number of considerations that should be considered. If these are just some of them that we sort of came up with, and I'm sure there's more. I'm not going to go through all of them. I think you've had an opportunity to look through them. So we have already started discussions with the volunteers, the fire department, local health inspectors, Chamber of Commerce, and a number of the groups and service providers that would be helping us out as well. And the majority of them are looking forward to it. There have been some that are still a little bit nervous. So there are three options that we'd like to present to council. Option number one is celebrate Settler Days on July 3rd as per normal, but with a drastically scaled back plan. Option number two is celebrate Party in Coaldale on August 6th and 7th, which could include on August 6th, the movie in the park, August 7th, parade and Main Street festivities planned in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, pancake breakfast, barbecue lunch, stage entertainment, family lounge, petting zoo, wagon rides, and so on that we would normally have for Settler Days. And option number three would be cancel the 2021 Settler Days celebration for this year. So the recommendation that we would like to put forward is that council approve Settler Days activities as option two, excluding the parade. The reason for excluding the parade, as you know, the parade can bring up to 5,000 plus people to the streets of Coaldale. And often Main Street is the big attraction where you can get it, 6 or 7 people deep. So that's the main reason we're thinking of maybe excluding the parade this year. The other thing is that because we weren't sure how the rollout would go, we have not purchased any candy at this point for the candy parade, and it would be very, very difficult at this point to secure enough candy for the parade. So the option number two would be August 6th and 7th, movie in the park, Main Street festivities, and then Millennium Park activities as mentioned above. So I'll leave that with council.
Thank you, Cindy. Any questions through this, Cindy, on Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate it moving it to a different date because it is a little bit too close. The one thing I do have on your operating is you have the Party in Coaldale and Family Lounge at 15,000, then fireworks at 15,000, but you don't have an estimated cost for the Main Street celebration. And just because we budgeted 30,000, I would like that to remain at 30,000. So that would include the Main Street party too.
That is correct, Councillor Simpson. That was the plan. The Main Street celebration was originally planned for October last year, if you do recall. And due to COVID and the weather turning, we had to sort of postpone it. But I do believe there was some budget. Spencer, I'm sorry, I may have to defer to you, but I believe there was some budget money that was available for that celebration at that time. Would that be carried forward?
Certainly, if I may, Mayor, I can weigh in on that.
Please.
Thank you. So through the chair to Councillor Simpson, excellent question. I think the answer at this point could be that we're very happy to work with the chamber and feel that we have a basis of a very good working relationship with them to support in any way that we can and look to opportunities that don't involve budgetary impact for the Main Street component, just more so empowering those businesses and organizations that do call Main Street home to participate in any way that they wish. And I think that would be a reasonable way to move forward. I don't know if that's what you would echo or not, Cindy.
Yes, absolutely. That's what I would say as well. And of course, we would remain in that $30,000 budget. We would not go over for any of those items.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Cindy, would it be possible to have all those activities that you have at Millennium Park, have them spread out through Main Street, and just for this year, keep everything together on Main Street? I know the last year that I organized it, we did everything on Main Street, and it was kind of cool because you're promoting the businesses, right? And we've got lots of parking lots right now where we could have different events.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. Yes, when in speaking with our volunteers, that was definitely an option that did come up, and that is something we could definitely look at and plan to do.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and Cindy, thank you so much for all your work on this. I'm really rather hesitant in terms of moving too quickly on any type of agenda on this, although I am cautiously in favor of your dates of August 6th and 7th. The reason I'm really hesitant and very cautious is mainly because if Coaldale is the only municipality, just for example, to host an event on any of these days, we might have a gathering of people from other municipalities, other communities who really don't have any events going on in their communities, so they will be attracted to come to Coaldale. So it could magnify the situation that much more. So that's the reason I'm really hesitant. And if you do space some of these ideas out, that they be kind of either addressed or advertised in a low-key manner so that we're not really gaining an overall amount of attention that would get too many people here. That's really my main concern, and I appreciate the parade being canceled for this year, mainly because of that. That's probably the best example why people from other communities, including Lethbridge, would come out to Coaldale. So that being said, I'm concerned that there might be other things going on that would attract. So I'm going to stop rambling here, as somebody says.
Great. No, thank you. And yeah, your concerns are noted. Absolutely. So that is one of the reasons we're presenting this to council, because that option 3 is to just cancel for one more year potentially. So.
Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. So speaking in favor of option 2 and what Councillor Lloyd said about spreading it out throughout Main Street, we've got parking lots, we've got some schoolyards, because I believe there's still going to be some type of restrictions. And what bothers me is the enforcement side of it. Who's going to be there to be the counter? If you've got a family lounge and you've got slip and slide and food trucks all in that one area, maybe you can use Baker School or Jenny Emery School to try and spread the participants out a little bit.
Yep, that's a very good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of have the same interpretation as maybe Councillor Chapman was alluding to, in the fact that we're very optimistic that we're going to have a full opening of the Alberta here by then. But I guess history in this pandemic has sort of shown that we take one step forward and 2 steps back sometimes. And I'm just kind of reticent that this list is quite aggressive in the sense of, I'm sure we have to commit to some of these people and they have to order up stuff and whatnot. So would the advertising be in the scope of how many participants? I know that that'd be dictated by the chief medical officer and the different regulations by the province, but I like you say, I hate to kind of throw an event and then how do you, have you talked about managing participation and limiting all that, the households? Do you reserve the times in the bouncy castles and all that stuff? Are there all those logistics? Is it pretty complicated, or is it simpler than I'm thinking?
It's just going to really depend on where we're sitting, I guess, as far as where restrictions are sitting. It can become very complicated. Like, yeah, even bouncy castles, it would have to be use at own risk if we even bring them in, because there's no way that we can disinfect and sanitize those things that I can think of. And then, of course, you always have lineups for that. The stage entertainment, I think, like if with the family lounge, with the liquor permit, there's only a maximum number of people that can come in. So we could potentially make a space large enough that people could spread out. But again, you have mentioned the policing part of it becomes very, very tricky. And how do you stop people from congregating, people that haven't seen each other for 15 months, that sort of thing. So it's not simple, that is for sure.
Well, especially in the era of such uncertainty on, if we're successful in whipping this or not by then. So when I was looking at it, my personal observation would be that maybe defer everything and really have a full-on night of light celebration and really focus a lot of our attention with a lot more certainty that we could have a really bang up celebration in that time frame and I wouldn't have any reservations that we could plan with a lot of certainty in November, a good celebration and whatnot. But that, I kind of hate to see people spend a lot of time and make deposits and book things and then have to retract everything at the last minute because of some backward step in the pandemic or whatnot. But,
and that's fair with all, with the key considerations, that's part of it. Absolutely. So yeah. And yeah, we'd have no issues with the Night of Lights. All of our service providers, I know they'd be willing to come out and make it a big splash. I know the fireworks people, they've got us booked in for both summer and winter, just in case. So they're prepared to come out either time. So yeah.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I believe from last time I heard that Premier Kenny had said that the Calgary Stampede is a go. I believe that's in July. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact dates. Is that something we could attentively, plan for something like this in August, but see how things go actually for the Stampede? Because that might give us an idea of how hard this will be or how easy will this be, and also if the numbers may rise during that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. We've already started contacting people, service providers, sort of got the plan rolling already. So I can't see why we couldn't wait. It's only 3 weeks away until the Stampede, a little over 3 weeks, and we can definitely do that and then revisit.
Well, I know that, regardless of the Stampede going ahead, Edmonton isn't going to go ahead with their exhibition, and that's late, after the Stampede, so about 10 or 12 days after the Stampede starts. So I guess that's the balance of things. Some communities are more cautious than others and what have you. So.
So yeah, we are good with whatever council feels comfortable with for the safety of the community.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. So if we don't go ahead with anything, I still think we need to recognize the businesses downtown and celebrate that some way, and maybe not total community, but just maybe with a business community. If we do not go ahead with anything else, I think that's one thing we need to do.
Okay.
Councillor Holm, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. So through to Cindy, what would your drop dead date be as far as being able to plan this and make it a go or not? Are you talking July 15th? Or are you talking 25th? What kind of day are we looking at?
Right. We could probably pull the plug. If we're looking at that August 6th, 7th, yeah, we could probably pull that plug that third week of July, one way or the other. So like by the 23rd. The people we're dealing with have just been awesome, like some of the bands as well. They understand the situation. So we're tentatively booking them right now, and some of them are already, but they do understand that there's potential that it won't happen as well. So the people that we normally deal with have just been fantastic. So I would say that third week of July.
So is it possible to approve the option 2 going forward with a final stamp of approval, if, or whatever you want to call it, at our July 12th meeting?
That would be, yes, that would be great. Yeah.
So we can give you some direction, but we don't give you the final go ahead.
That, which can definitely work with that.
I would, you know, my looking at the list, I would strongly suggest deleting inflatable castles and the slip inside, and probably the petting zoo, because they're pretty close contact kind of activities. But that's just my thought.
Just as a side note, the petting zoo has already said that they aren't comfortable, so they have declined for the summer. So that was one of our suppliers that isn't feeling comfortable yet, so.
And
All right.
just one
Councilor
other,
Chapman.
yeah, thank you, Worship. And just as much as we're all fans of food, I'm really cautious and concerned about food preparation, and of course all the protocols that go with it. So if it's going to be a local, more intimate event for our community, that'd be one thing. But to understand that those kinds of things are really are real big cautions on my part.
Would food trucks be an option, or are you thinking just eliminate food altogether?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I see food trucks quite often around the city, and so if the food preparation and all that stuff is handled very internally, then it's not about, you know, a mass production for everybody.
Okay, yeah, I see Councilor Holm. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I'll make a motion that we direct administration to continue planning for option 2 minus the parade, and that council will make a final decision on at the July 12th meeting.
Okay. Any discussion? Councilor Holm, Simpson, sorry.
Thank you, Worship. Just because we did talk about the inflatables, the one thing I would be curious about is if there's a spray or something that you could spray on. Usually the sprays have to be on for about 3 minutes to kill all bacteria. So if maybe there's a spray, of course, that's going to add to the cost. Of course, that's going to add to the time. So I don't know if it's even doable, but maybe that's something we can look into for that, because I do know that's a big thing. And I have no problem with the food trucks because they all have to be approved by the food inspection. So.
Okay.
We will check into that.
All right. Any other questions? I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? Okay, so we have all 7 of us agree, so that's unanimous. Okay. So we'll have the final report on July 12th, and thank you to everybody that's already been engaged thus far.
Great, thank you very much.
And then we have the next item is safety fund request, accessibility audit. Melanie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The following report is to present council with a request to access funds from the safety fund for the purposes of the accessibility working group conducting an accessibility audit. So council previously reviewed a request for funding for the accessibility working group for the same reason at the May 25th, 2021 regular council meeting. The Accessibility Working Group is a committee that serves as a voice for those living with disabilities in Coaldale. Since its creation, the working group has developed a series of accessibility checklists informed by the Alberta Safety Codes Council's barrier-free design guide and other municipal examples for barrier-free design. Other achievements of the group include the development of an awareness video to inform the community of the group's mission, vision, and opportunities to get involved in the accessibility audit. The reason why the Accessibility Working Group is requesting financial support is to aid in the execution of the audit, which will assess Coaldale's streets, sidewalks, parks, playgrounds, and public buildings. Information gathered from these audits are going to help inform future improvements for the town and serve as recommendations for the short and long term. The accessibility audit relates to the safety fund, as its objective is to determine where accessibility and safety concerns are and how they can affect seniors and persons with disabilities. However, the benefits of the audit will extend far beyond persons with disabilities, as we will all encounter some sort of mobility issue in the future. So this applies to many residents in Coaldale. So the working group has prepared a budget for the accessibility audit that includes expenses for an accessibility consultant, wages for student participation, and supplies to conduct the audit, such as measuring tapes, meter sticks, and clipboards. The accessibility audit will serve as a dual purpose for students, including opportunities to gain work experience in assessing the built environment, but also learning the importance of promoting inclusivity within their community. So the working group is requesting a total of $2,500 from the safety fund with the project breakdown or the budget breakdown as follows. The accessibility consultant is charging a $60 hourly rate, which is really good considering they are a registered architect. And for a total of 25 hours, so they are helping us in develop the checklist, as well as going to do an audit of one of our public buildings to ensure that our checklists work well. Student wages are $15 for an hourly rate, and this does apply to, we've reached out to Lethbridge College at this point in time for the civil engineering technician program, and that would apply to some of the more technical, cumbersome checklists that we have. So some of them are quite detailed and require a little bit more expertise to be able to perform those measurements, but we do have checklists that are a little more simplified and would be perfectly fine for a junior high student or a high school student to participate. And lastly, $100 for supplies. For stakeholder engagement, the Accessibility Working Group is in the editing phase of a promotional and educational video relating to the Accessibility Working Group, to what is an accessibility audit, and also a training video on how to conduct an audit, some of those first steps, which is something that we decided to do just during COVID times and not being able to get into groups to have people trained for an audit. So following the completion of the audit, a summary of all the results will be shared with the community as well as with council. So I'll just finish off with decision options for council include that council may wish to approve the full requested amount for the accessibility audit, or they may wish to reject the amount requested for the accessibility audit. And that's all that I have.
Thank you, Mel. Is there any questions of administration? You know where the $2,500 is coming from? Do we have funds in the existing budget line to accommodate that request, Melanie?
So yes, this is being requested from the safety fund. I believe it's about $35,000, and it is for town staff use for internal use.
So it's a budgeted item more or less, so it's not extra.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the motion would be to direct that budget to come from the town safety fund then as well. Any questions through to administration? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, just a question with regards to the audit itself. Do you have follow-up plans for that audit?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Chapman. Do you mean follow-up plans in what way, like when it's going to be taking place?
So in your audit, you'll discover a number of areas that will need improvement. Obviously, it'll be a number of budgetary items for council to consider in the future. So that will be addressed at a later time.
Yes, so once all of the audits have been completed, we're going to be assessing all of the data that we've received and seeing what our priorities at this point in time, which improvements can be made with existing or planned future projects, and we're going to base our recommendations off of that.
And or grants. I'll make a motion to approve funding for this for $2,500. Budget monies to come from your safety fund, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Chapman. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Melanie. And before we go on to any further business, just have to back up to item 7.6. And that was first reading of that bylaw. And there was in the recommendation, it was recommended to have the public hearing at 5:30, and staff have advised that it would be better to have it scheduled for 6. So Councillor Simpson, you made the motion for first reading. Would you consider that a friendly amendment to the motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay. Is everybody else agreeable with that friendly amendment? Okay. All right, good. We'll consider that as a friendly amendment to that motion, that the public hearing time be set at 6 o'clock on July the 12th as opposed to 5:30. And now we have item 10.1. Here's a brief update on the Southern Alberta Energy from Waste Association. You'll see in the council package that the group has authorized our project engineers to develop a request for expressions of interest for technology vendors to provide the technology to the site that's approved in Newell, and so that's exciting. Hopefully that will be launched early in the next few days, going on to the different procurement sites, and we're hopeful that we'll have a number of vendors that will respond to it. We've had a lot of interest lately since we've announced the site and that, and the only correction in the information package is that we're not limiting the vendors to providing alternative energy in the way of electricity. They can also look at vendors that can provide other forms of alternate energy, syngases or steam or district heat kind of thing. So it's not limited to just generating electricity. So we're hopeful that that will draw a lot of attention, and we can perhaps get the project underway for Newell, and this only takes in black waste, like the black bin waste. It doesn't consider taking anybody's composting waste or any of the recyclable materials in that. So it's not going after anything that can be recycled. So just an update on what SAY was up to, and hopefully we'll have the results of that call out in September. Any questions? I entertain a motion to receive that report for information then. Councillor Lloyd, all in favor? Okay, opposed? You're in favor, Roger? Or so that's unanimous in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so we have that, so that we have, then we have 11, section 11, and correspondence items 11, 1, 2, and 3. Councillor Avery?
Yeah, I'd just like to speak on not putting the letters in. So I understand that we do have a bylaw, but it doesn't seem very transparent to, you know, those that are following along what council is doing. If we're not providing these letters, we're saying we got them. You know, it's the prerogative of the mayor and CEO if we're going to answer them, but I think we should include them in our council package, just so, you know, if people have sent them, signed them, I would believe they're okay with them being published and put in the council package. I'm just, you know, what does J. Jones, May 27th mean? You know, to those, like I say, to those that are following along with us, you know, A. Parker, June 1st. What did he send? There was, you know, has there been a reply? And, you know, so I just think we need to maybe be a little bit more transparent with this correspondence side of things. So when it comes to a vote, I'm going to vote against receiving these because they were not put out to public so they could see what we had received.
I respect what you're saying, but you know, I guess the other part of that is that the bylaw was constructed by members of council, and that was worded that way by members of council as well. So the majority, you know, and I think when the bylaw was passed, it was probably passed unanimously as worded that way. So I just don't want to give any indication that it is contrary to the procedural bylaw that was actually went through a public process and whatnot. So, but I respect your thoughts on the transparency of the contents of the letters. So. Councillor Simpson, did you want to say anything? Or?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The only thing I am with a little bit concerned with that is maybe some of those people may not expect that to be on the council thing. So we would almost have to get them to agree to have it on. It would become a little bit more complicated because I don't know if I wrote to council, if I was on the other side of the fence here, if I would actually know my letter would hit it, and I may not speak as freely due to that.
Councillor Holm?
I don't really agree with Councillor Simpson on this point, because if it is addressed to all of council, and council is a public body, that I think everybody who writes a letter to council would fully understand that that is public information. I guess the only issue I have is either we include all correspondence or we include none, which would also mean that if we got a letter from the premier on something as correspondence, that we would not be able to include something like that, which at times I think would be very important for the public to understand that we have had communication on something with the premier or a minister or something else. So I believe that maybe we were a little anxious in getting our last bylaw through that said that we wouldn't have the public or the publish any of the communication that comes through, because I think we probably have already contravened our own bylaw by publishing or having correspondence included in meetings that were held just 2 months or a month and a half ago.
It might be in order to maybe direct the administration to bring back that article within the bylaw for further examination, so we can, you know, possibly look at an amendment to the bylaw if warranted. I know that our legislative coordinator went through and along with other parts of administration, worked collaboratively with external people to vet the bylaw thoroughly, and that it was, you know, very exhaustive. But you know, this one article within the bylaw might be worthwhile to you know, bring that back for a closer examination and potentially amend the procedural bylaw depending on what the outcome of that look might be like. So, you know, maybe council might want to consider making a motion to direct the administration to look at this article and bring back a report to council in either June or July, I guess. Probably July would be the best time. But whatever council so wishes. Okay, so we have item 11, 1, 2, and 3. So what's your wishes? Councillor Simpson?
I'll make a motion to receive those.
Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, we have 5 and opposed. Councillor Holman, Councillor Avery opposed. Okay, anything else that you would like to? Councillor Avery?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I'd like to make a motion to have administration readdress that section of the bylaw and bring it back to our July 12th meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Avery. Any discussion? Okay, call the question, all in favor? Okay, so we have 3 in favor, opposed? And 4 opposed. So motion fails. Okay, and then we have information items 12.1 FCSS board meeting minutes of April 2021. A motion to receive those for information unless Councillor Chapman wants to add any more commentary to the minutes. All right, who would like to move those for information? Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous, so those are carried unanimously, and then we are at the end of the public portion of today's meeting. So I would entertain a motion to go into closed meeting.
Just before we go, 12.2 and 12.3, were those items included in that motion for information? If not, I'll just move them as all 3 items.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I missed my sheet cut off. I had a hard copy that didn't have that on there for some reason. So thank you very much for including 12.2 and 12.3, the Green Acres Foundation and the support letter for RCMP. So that's a friendly amendment. Is that okay with council? Okay, all right, all in favor of that then? That's carried then. All right, then a motion to go in closed session. Councillor Simpson moves us into closed session. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much.